Martin Luther King Jr. is quoted to have said, "We are not makers of history, we are made by history." History is not always comprised of men of big names and stature. Sometimes the biggest men's names escape us because when they are living, they do so from a place of intention, not for glory or affluence. As I look over the picturesque view of the city of Dayton from its highest point at Woodland Cemetery, I couldn't help but be moved by its splendor and epic beauty. The winding overlaid brick roads and paths, with their twists and turns, are filled with stories of human tragedy and triumph. On one hillside is the eternal resting place of those who perished from the 1918 flu epidemic, and on a companion hillside, the quiet silence of those who perished during the 1913 flood. Woodland is the resting place for over 100,000 individuals and has been in existence for 180 years. We arrived at Woodland to find the final chapter in a story about a common man who drew international attention during a time of great transition in this country. The aftermath of the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 and the period of Reconstruction that would follow would be the backdrop during that period of time when almost 4 million slaves would now be free and be given the hope and possibility to live a life only dreamed about. One such man was Jordan Anderson. His story is both moving and triumphant because it gives insight into the heart and mind of a people who had been silenced for over 275 years. Yes, the feelings of a former slave now free to speak in a way that he may not have dared speak while under the domination of his owner. This powerful story of resilience and courage is masked in the beauty of a landscape of mature trees, birds, and a peculiar silence where you can hear the birds singing. If peace can be a place, that place would be Woodland. To tell the story of Jordan Anderson, we must go back to a time where not all men were considered equal. The degradation of slavery would leave a people broken and without hope until January 1st of 1863, a dawn that would be like no other dawn. On this morning, 4 million people would wake up to freedom. When the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect, many slaves did not immediately leave their owners. For many, this was the only life they knew. One such man was Jordan Anderson. Jordan had been the faithful and hard-working slave for Colonel P.H. Anderson for 32 years. It would take Union soldiers who had made base camp at the plantation that he managed to set Jordan and his family free. We don't know if Colonel Anderson didn't get the memo, but it seems that he and many other landowners understood the economic impact of the changes that would come under the Emancipation Proclamation, and their denial would drive them to try to keep things as they were. Historically, there were slaves who would not be freed until June of 1865, the celebrated Juneteenth, because owners tried to relocate and hide their property to avoid being rescued. Apparently, Colonel Anderson chose to hide his freed men in plain sight, which resulted in Jordan and his family being set free. Jordan, along with his family, eventually made their way from Tennessee to Ohio by the help of physician Clark McDermott. His final resting place is also at Woodland. Jordan is described as industrious, intelligent, trusted, and resourceful. These attributes garner the attention of all he meets, including Dayton banker Valentine Winters. Winters was the founder of Winters Bank, which later became Bank One and is now Chase Bank. The Jordan Anderson story is profound and has been told all over the world. Jordan dictates a letter with the assistance of Valentine Winters, a document noted by literary scholars as a first-hand account of the feelings of a freed slave having to reconcile complex emotions with the person who formerly owned them. The letter has been published around the world and has graced the lecture halls of inner-city schools, to the greatest Ivy League schools in the world. Slaves used humor and satire as a coping mechanism and to avoid punishment. Literary experts acknowledge the skill in which Jordan addresses serious issues in a way that has been compared to the writings of Mark Twain. While it is acknowledged that his letter was dictated to Valentine Winters, there are numerous accounts that Jordan was not illiterate and fully capable of communicating his thoughts and intentions clearly. Hi, today we are joined by Angie Hoschauer, and she's the Director of Marketing and Development for Woodland Cemetery. And she has taken us on a guided tour of Celebrated African Americans, which is a special exhibit that they have here at Woodland Cemetery. And today, one of our first features is to visit the gravesite of Jordan Anderson. Angie, can you give us a little history behind Jordan Anderson and his family? One thing that I noted that I think is absolutely noteworthy is that this cemetery was not segregated. In 1907, he would have been buried here, but I don't see any indication that people of color were placed in special locations. Can you speak to that, please?
Sure. So Jordan Anderson and his family, his wife, his mother-in-law, and several of his children are buried in this one lot. He actually purchased this lot in 1889 and for just $35. But back then, $35 was, could have been a lot of money, especially for a person like Jordan. But he was gainfully employed and did have some money. So Jordan and his family are all here in this lot here, but there's another lot on the other side of the cemetery where he has another daughter. Woodland is a non-denominational cemetery, and we were not segregated. The cemetery was open for burials to anyone of any color, of any race, of any religion, and we continue that practice today.
That's phenomenal. Angie, can you speak a little about Jordan Anderson? I mean, I think the focus has been on Jordan Anderson. He has a fantastic story, and it's a heart-wrenching story about a slave who, post-Civil War, finds freedom. And he's emancipated. Of course, the Emancipation was written in 1863, but he wasn't actually liberated until 1864. So you could kind of argue that it wasn't necessarily a peaceful separation, and I think we have documentation to show that it wasn't necessarily a peaceful separation. Can you speak to any specific trivia that you're aware of that we may not have been able to find about Mr. Anderson?
Well, Mr. Anderson once he was freed, he got a job at the Nashville hospital, and so he was working there. I'm not sure in what capacity. But Valentine Winters, which a lot of people here in the Dayton area are very familiar with the name Valentine Winters of the Winters Bank, and his son-in-law was a doctor and was going down to the Nashville hospital, and he encounters Jordan and says, you know what, let's get you out of Tennessee. We have some opportunities for you. So Jordan and his family are brought to Dayton, and then he actually begins a working relationship with Valentine Winters. And this goes on for many years. And so it is because of Valentine Winters, who was an abolitionist, that brought Jordan to Ohio, which was a free state at that time. And there were no Jim Crow laws, there were no, still the hatred towards the African Americans, and better opportunities being in a northern state. So he is brought here, he does several jobs, and he is very successful, as are his children.
Wonderful. How many members of the Anderson family are actually here at Woodland?
So in this lot that we are standing at, there are at least 8 members of the family, several sons and daughters, some other family members, ancillary family members, and then across the cemetery is another daughter in another section of the cemetery.
They list their title or their role in life: father, mother, brother. Was that symbolic of the time, or do you have any history that suggests why the headstones are marked the way that they are?
Actually, that is something that has been through the ages. You can go back to the 1600s and find the relationship of the person to other people in the cemetery. So not necessarily just because they have mother, brother, father. Even today we see modern day headstones that list, you know, brother, father, uncle, son, you know, on a headstone. But what is unique about the Anderson family is that in Jordan's letter, he indicates that his greatest desire were for his kids to learn how to read and write, which of course they all did. One of his sons, Felix Grundy, becomes a captain with the Buffalo Soldiers and fighting in the West during the early turn of the century. And then his other son, one of his other sons, Dr. Valentine Winter, which I just gave away, is that he became a doctor. So that is listed on there, and that I could see would be a prestige, that, you know, his son was a captain, his father was, or his other son was a doctor. So that's just very significant.
Angie, you have put together just a fabulous tribute to African Americans here at the cemetery, and I mean, I've been so moved by the things that you've shown us. What made you put together a celebration for African Americans here at Woodland?
Well, I was doing a program at an assisted living facility over on the west side, and it was a program about the sports legends of Dayton. And of course there were several African Americans on that program. And the program coordinator asked me, could you do a program just about African Americans? And I said, well, of course I can. I just need to put it together. I have lots of stories. I knew the Jordan Anderson story and several other African Americans that are buried here. C.J. McClin, James H. McGee, all names that we're very familiar with here in Dayton. So I put this together, and when I completed the program, it just happened to be February, which is of course Black History Month. So I called back to the program coordinator. I said, I've got the program done, I'm ready to present it. And she says, great, bring it. So I did, and it was very, very, very well received. So I'm happy that I was able to put that program together. And it's grown because as I have learned more stories about the African Americans of note that are buried here, I keep adding them to the program. So it keeps people's stories fresh and alive. And, you know, one of those stories just may resonate with a resident. It could have been their ancestor, or just somebody that they didn't know about, or maybe somebody that they even admire.
I've got one final question for you. If someone in our audience wants to actually take the walking tour and they have their cell phone with them, there's an app that you can download and actually walk and take this tour yourself. Can you just speak a little bit about that for people, please?
Sure. So on our website, we have a free download of our mobile app, or at your app store, just look for Woodland Cemetery and Arboretum. And you download that to your phone, and when you're here, you can pull up any of the 13 tours that we have online. And when you click on Notable African Americans, you start at the beginning of the cemetery, and it's GPS located, so it will take you to every single site, and you can do the entire cemetery. You can do it by your car. If you're immobile and can't get out to the cemetery, you can even do it from the comfort of your couch at home on our website or on your mobile phone. Just go to woodlandcemetery.org, click on tours, and then you'll see the virtual tours. And even on that page, you can take any of the tours, or you can click on the download app and install it onto your phone.
Thank you, Angie. This has been an amazing tour, and I would highly recommend that many of you check out the website, come out to the cemetery. It's a beautiful, beautiful tour, and thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
On August 7th, 1865, Jordan, who could not read or write at the time, dictated a letter to his old master. Introducing the letter of Jordan Anderson.
To my old master, Colonel P.H. Anderson, Big Spring, Tennessee. Sir, I got your letter and was glad to find that you had not forgotten Jordan and that you wanted me to come back and live with you again, promising to do better for me than anybody else can. I often felt uneasy about you. I thought the Yankees would have hung you long before this for harboring Rebs they found at your house. I suppose they never heard about your going to Colonel Martin's to kill a Union soldier that was left by his company in their stable. Although you shot at me twice before I left you, I did not want to hear of you or being hurt. And I'm glad that you are still living. It would do me good to go back to the dear old home again and see Miss Mary, Miss Martha, Allen, Esther, Green, and Lee. Give my love to them all and tell them I hope I will meet with them in a better world, if not in this. I want to know particularly what are the good chances you propose to give me. I'm doing tolerably well here. I get $25 a month with victuals and clothing. Have a comfortable home for Mandy. The folks call her Miss Anderson, and the children, Millie, Jane, and Grundy, go to school and are learning well. The teacher says Grundy has a head for a preacher. They go to Sunday school, and Mandy and me attend church regularly. We are kindly treated. Sometimes we overhear others saying, them colored people were slaves down in Tennessee. The children feel hurt when they hear such remarks, but I tell them it was no disgrace in Tennessee to belong to Colonel Anderson. Many darkies would have been proud, as I used to be, to call you master. Now, if you will write and say what wages you will give me, I will be able to decide whether it would be to my advantage to move back. As to my freedom, which you say I can have, there is nothing to be gained on that score, as I got my free papers in 1864 from the Provost Marshal General in Nashville. Mandy says she would be afraid to go back without some proof that you were disposed to treat us justly and kindly. And we have concluded to test your sincerity by asking you to send our wages for the time we served you. This will make us forget and forgive the old scores and rely on your justice and friendship in the future. I served you faithfully for 32 years, and Mandy 20 years, and $25 a month for me, and $2 a week for Mandy. Our earnings would amount to $11,680. Add to the interest for the time our wages have been kept back, and deduct what you paid for our clothing, the 3 doctors' visits to me, and pulling a tooth for Mandy, and the balance will show what we are in justice entitled to. Please send the money by Adams Express in care of V. Winters, Esquire, Dayton, Ohio. If you fail to pay us for faithful labors in the past, we can have little faith in your promises in the future. We trust the good Maker has opened your eyes to the wrongs which you and your forefathers have done to me and my fathers, and making us toil for you for generations without recompense. Here I draw my wages every Saturday night, but in Tennessee, there was never any payday for the Negroes, any more for the horses and cows. Surely we will be a day of reckoning for those who defraud the laborers of his hire. In answering this letter, please state if there will be any stated for my Millie and Jane, who are now grown up and both good-looking girls. You know how it was for poor Matilda and Catherine. I would rather stay here and starve and die. If it comes to that, then have my girls brought to shame by the violence and wickedness of their young masters. You will also please state if there has been any schools open for the colored children in our neighborhood. The great desire of my life is now to give my children an education and have them form virtuous habits. Say howdy to George Carter and thank him for taking the pistol away from you when you were shooting at me. From your old servant, Jordan Anderson.